So the concept of hell, I don't know, but in my experience, and I know that my near-death experience is not the universal kind, or the predominant kind, but what happened to me was that I was cleansed. I was cleansed so that my soul felt like I could ascend to the next level of being. So it seems to me that there are these levels of being, these levels of heaven, and we experience them here. Some people astral project out and they have their spirit body and they still kind of look like themselves and they're floating around in this plane. That's an example of a level of heaven. If Earth is a level of heaven, and that's a level of heaven, and this Eden-like place where Eben Alexander went to, it was like this hyper-corporeal place of 10 zillion colors and beautiful sounds and irradiating beings. That's another level, and then there are other levels beyond that. But I think that the infinite level is oneness with the oneness itself, the obliteration of self completely, back inside the oneness. Because I could see in the length of the long tail of my soul, I could see the origin of my being called into being was, as in biblical language, from everlasting to everlasting, created being, but not eternal. Once I became consciousness, I was no longer the eternal being. I was somehow connected and separate at the same time. My eternal nature was contained in the eternal nature of the oneness, and it was no longer mine. I'm not sure if I'm saying that very clearly, but
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. 'Cause the metaphor I always use, and I think fits it really well, is the one of the ocean and a wave. Because you've got the ocean, which is consciousness, and then when a wave is manifested within that ocean, that becomes apparently an individual of it, and you can see it and measure its behaviour on its own. But at the same time, when it dies and when it crashes onto the shore, it then becomes back into the ocean. It was never separate, it was part of it, just expressed as an individual. And that's kind of the way I understand us, as points of awareness in a field of consciousness.
And even you can the field of consciousness, you're talking about the frequency of the wave. So the waveform itself is a frequency wave that is somehow part of and separate to, separate from. And so I was just kind of picking up on the electromagneticness of wave frequencies and light frequencies, and that we, and physics, particle and wave at the same time. So I imagine ourselves as photons, individuated photons with no mass, and both wave and particle at the same time, and that we are, no light exists without a source. Light is sourced somehow, and our stars sources it through fission, but somehow it's created, and particles, these wave particle forms, are ejected from the solar mass, and become individuated somehow. We can see individual photons, but also there are these elongation things too. So that's kind of where I'm at with that, and it's very similar to the ocean idea, the droplet, as you're describing, just another metaphor, and that's all we have.
That's the problem. You can't explain experiences in any other way, because these kind of experiences, from what I've never had one, but from what I can understand, it's something that's beyond language and beyond translation. So all we're left with is metaphors.
It's beyond all things.
That's it. And I think it was the same back in the times of Jesus, who undoubtedly would have had these experiences and trying to teach other people, who then took them literally. The kingdom of God is within you,
And it is. And it is.
It is, but not in the way that people would interpret it.
No. But you can. But if you look inside yourself, the easiest, most direct access to the kingdom of heaven is inside the self. But once you're inside yourself, you discover that the inside is vaster than the exterior. Much vaster, because this same kingdom permeates all things. I mean, this wouldn't be here without... Hi there.
This is Peter.
Hi there.
I'm in the interview at the moment.
Hi there, Mom.
I love it.
That's great. Oh,
it's good, isn't it? Oh well.
Well, I hope
That's
you're
all right.
recording this. You're recording
Oh
this?
yeah, I'm recording this.
So where were we at before Mum came in?
We were talking about the kingdom of God and taking things literally, yeah.
So Jesus really meant that the kingdom of God is within, beside, beneath, above, below, among. That word, the kingdom of heaven is within you, has all of those meanings. And by accessing the inner self through these tools we had talked about earlier on that didn't get caught in recording, but I'll bring them back in again, through the tools of the practice of prayer and meditation that are global, that get handed down generation after generation because they work. By using the tools of contemplation, we can access the temple of the heart, the eye wherein the eye sees me, the lens through which the light flows, or the opening channel of flow for the divine whiskey of God, or wine in Jesus' case.
Yeah.
Lots of metaphors. Oh, I know what I wanted to say is that all language about God is relational metaphor. You know, and you get your father, you got your mother, you got your brother, you got your sister, you got all language about personal nature of God is metaphorical in terms of relationship, and so that gets literalized as well. You know, God, the old man with the beard, walking in and never a woman, but we know that in the Bible that's not true. There are, the God as woman shows up and gives birth, has a womb. Those are ignored mostly because it doesn't serve.
Of course. I mean, people can only understand things a lot of the time by personifying something, especially when it's something that's out of the range of our understanding. I mean, just trying to contemplate the concept of eternity. We can't understand what that must be like, so we come up with models for it, and it's I suppose the same with God and things like this. Is people have to personify it to begin to somewhat understand what it is, but in a very limited way.
Yeah, though when I was dead, I knew much more I know now. Infinite amount now. My brain can't contain and couldn't bring back. So, but what I could bring back and what was sent back with me, I didn't choose to bring this stuff back, it came back. I chose to dive into the Christian language of the Christian tradition to find a metaphorical and symbolic tool set to conceptualize and somehow contain in language my experience so I could even think about it. So I would have a way to process this data inside my head and attach it to historical events and historical lives of mystics and how they wrote their language globally, and cross-reference those between them, and cross-reference to the Bible, the source of all of that stuff, and all the literature around it, for selfish reasons, so that I could begin to think about how to use a language to express it to myself, knowing one day I would want to express it to others, but also understanding that language is always it's always conceptualization of an idea, and never language itself is not the thing itself. This iPhone, I call this an iPhone, but that's just a tag I put on it to differentiate it from all the other 10,000 things there are.
That's right.
Well, that's
good. And going back to the whole idea as well of that, with going back to animals and things like that, something that I always say is, if you have a dog, you buy a dog, and that dog is now yours. In my view, no, that dog's just another dog that's you've given the opportunity to live with you. It's not yours. You don't own that dog, just like you don't own your husband, you don't own your wife, you don't own your house. It's just something on a bit of paper that says you do. It's an idea. Same with money.
Oh, especially money.
Money is the most powerful idea in the world, but if the idea wasn't attached to it, it'd be just bits of metal, bits of paper. So it shows you how powerful a human thought and a human idea can be, to the event where it's causing people to kill each other.
Oh yeah,
You
we're
know,
fighting over where we go when we die.
I know,
My
I
heaven,
know.
my heaven,
Yeah,
not your heaven.
yeah, but they don't
And
understand
I'll
that.
kill you to
Well,
prove it.
that's it. But what if both of those are correct? What if your heaven and my heaven can both exist?
What if there is 10 million heavens?
Yeah, that's it. What if each heaven is tailored specifically to us and what we believe? I mean,
and is a layer like a brain of the universes, BRANES, layers upon layers of universes. Maybe there's layers upon layers, or balloons in a bag of heavens that touch each other, like a multiverse concept.
Yeah.
But ultimately leading back to the eternal oneness of all being. Because I know that when I see, because we talked about this a little earlier, you were talking about the life that you see in the eyes of animals that you love, and they love you, and there's a purity there, and which shows that you don't own them, that they're independent beings living with you. But when I see the light of God in people, I sometimes have this momentary flash that moves through me, that I am seeing the light, that the eye of God is seeing through me, the eye of God seeing through you, and that the eye of God sees itself.
That's right.
And that it's beyond my soul and my consciousness. It's not my consciousness doing that. It's the origin and the primary created nature of my own being that's beyond that is perceivable. All right, like I do see this, but it's not the totality of it. And when I experience it, it feels like the experience of the totality of heaven, but it's not, because there's so much more to go.
That's it. And again, it's something that we won't ever be able to perceive or guess, because it's, the size of the universe, the complexity of it. We know 0.05 or so % of it, and yet we say we know things. We don't know anything. We can guess, but that's it.
Well, we now could guess we're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, we in terms of extraterrestrials and things like that.
Yeah, the statistical likelihood among the septillion galaxies with septillion stars and planetary systems, it's pretty unlikely.
It's ridiculous to assume that we're alone, isn't it? It really is.
Here, cheers to the end of anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism.
No, not anthropocentrism.
Anthrocentric. Right. Okay.
That's what I meant. Anthropocentrism. But the light of God pervades all things, and it's also just as likely that the light of God, by any other name, pervades their worlds as well.
Again, it comes back to this definition of what is God. Whenever you say God, people think big man with a beard, or an individual. Santa Claus, basically, or
giving me gifts.
That's it, exactly, or taking them away, and they think of a unique point of another being, an individual, whereas I see it more as an encompassment of all of us. So when Jesus said, I'm the Son of God or whatever, I don't know, I've never read the Bible, I'll admit, but he came across, everybody knows that he was the Son of God. What he meant, I think, was he's no different from us, in which sense we are all the Son of God. It's just finding that and understanding that.
And the daughter of God too.
And the daughter of God.
Avoid the patriarchy there.
Exactly.
Which is hard in language, because our language has developed, our language has evolved, our spiritual language and our cultural language has evolved with this patriarchal point of view, and it's really difficult to parse it apart, especially in this age when we have transgender people. That's the language doesn't contain that very well. So that's another subject for another day. But so the God is the circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. But I think it's also bigger than our conceptualization of it. The intensity of the consciousness of the divine being was so. And here's something I'm just beginning to talk about publicly, because people don't want to hear this, generally speaking. It's so immense that it produces the experience of awe. Now, I was like, awe, okay. Well, what's awe? Well, awe is scriptures that's frequently translated as fear, but that's not really the right word. Awe contains fear, but it also contains wonderment and adoration.
Yeah. That's what I
And
was going
so
to say.
it's all of these at the same time. The size of the consciousness of God was so eternal and infinite that if one more drop was added to me, I would have, as a soul, I would have exploded. That's how it felt to me. I was on the very edge of, it's kind of like, and I equate this to good sex. You're right on the edge, and it goes on and on and on and on. This foreplay, and you're about to die from the pleasure because it hurts. It was that times a bazillion, and looking into the divine self, as deep as I could see, and I know that I couldn't see all of it. I know I couldn't, not even close to it, was so awful.
Yeah, and it's unexplainable, I'm sure.
It is, and anyway, so what am I talking about there? I don't even know I went off on that riff. Sorry.
That's the best way. That's the best way. Completely spontaneous. That's why I know when I do it. I mean, I've only done one interview up to now, but when I do them, I never like to plan things and write down questions and write down answers or whatever. I prefer to go in virgin and just whatever happens, because that's the only way you can get honest conversation.
And you're very good at this.
Oh, thanks.
No, I wouldn't just say that because I didn't know what I was. So everybody in the audience, we just met. This is our very first conversation.
Yeah, only just, literally about. Well, we spoke yesterday, but we only met about an hour ago, and
we spoke this way on a keyboard.
the normal way these days, unfortunately, although not on a phone. I can't text on a phone. I don't know how people do it. I can touch type.
That's why I was sending you terrible things. I do voice chat. Take notes on my misspellings.
Autocorrect is the worst thing ever invented, I swear. Yes, but yeah, I mean, we met an hour or so ago, and the first 40 minutes, within 5 minutes of that, we were just talking like this, and unfortunately, the first half hour or so got lost of the recording because I'm stupid, to put it simply.
Nah, you're just still learning your technology.
Yeah,
I like technology. I like technology, and there's a learning curve. And I'm happy to be your virgin, one of your virgins. I don't know how many you've had.
You are the virgin with this, because the first woman I had was Christine, who was a Reiki teacher, but she came to my house to do it, so we were just sat between a microphone. You're the first one on using this technology, so yeah.
And just to let people know, I'm in the United States on the Eastern Seaboard, and
I'm not.
Where are you?
I'm in England. I'm in some countryside in England with cows and horses all over the place. If you've never seen a cow, you're not missing much. Don't worry.
Yeah. One of well, my nearest neighbors are I have one human neighbor that's pretty close by, but my nearest neighbors are wild animals.
They're the best neighbors you could have.
They never complain. They're always fun to see. Yeah.
What wildlife do you have around you?
I've got whales and porpoise and dolphin and seals and eagles, chickadees, nuthatches, little songbirds, fish of all kinds. Once I had a moose in my yard. I had a lynx a couple years ago, which is a wildcat.
Yeah.
And moose are also called caribou, right? Is that wrong? I can't remember that. Well, anyway, we have American moose, porcupines, and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Do you know what we've got? Pigeons. That's about it. Yeah, we don't have anything quite so interesting. We've got pigeons, hedgehogs, and squirrels, and that's about it.
Oh, we got squirrels.
Yeah,
we got squirrels. Yeah, I live in a pretty rural place on purpose. I chose to live and work in a rural place. I grew up outside of Boston. I lived in New Haven, which is outside of New York, and because nature soothes my soul. Nature, the divine light of love leaks through blades of grass, blows in the wind, is seen in the eyes of chickadees, rises from the earth and the trees that surround me. And so I live on the edge of the wild to soothe myself, because I find the world to be harsh.
It's very false. It's very fake, I think, because it's just, again, it's all based on societal ideas of what one should be and what one shouldn't be, and it's all nonsense. But you say things like that, and people will tell you, "I'll go and hug a tree" or whatever. You're hippie. But the thing is, try it. Go and live in the country for a bit. You'll see.
And what you're saying is true. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We're not saying that you have to believe that you will, and you'll have the experience. You will have the experience, and if you're willing to try it, then come back and tell me. Because it's unbelievable. You get yourself out. That's why these mystics and all that go and live in caves in the Himalayas, just surrounded by nothing but their own self. Their
inner world and the outer world of nature.
And the amount you can learn from just doing that. People go on meditation retreats for the same reason, get away from all this technology, away from all this nonsense. And you begin to clear all the things you've been taught that you are, because it's not. It's a very difficult thing to explain to someone that hasn't had that experience. But the best thing is try it. Don't just believe or dismiss it. Try it and then know.
Right, it teaches you. And you're right about social constructs. I mean, the what we are is purely what we think we are. And so the Chinese have a different language, and they are interiorly different than we are. They think differently because their language is different. Their cultural context is different, so they approach life differently, and they have different relationships as a result of it, and it's all because of ideas.
That's right.
And they're all things that humanity developed. Pardon?
I mean, Oriental countries themselves, Japan, for instance. I've never been to Japan. I speak Japanese, so I'd like to go to Japan, but I'm terrified of flying.
Oh, nice.
But I've tried Chinese. I couldn't do that. But if you just look at the Japanese culture, you go over there, they're all bowing and saying welcome, and they, the loveliest people you could ever meet. They'll pamper you because you're their guest, and that's the way I think it should be. Just looking after each other, not because you have to or because you've been told you should, but because it's the right thing to do.
And it rises out of the heart.
It does, yeah. Not from people that take their morals from the Bible or from the Quran or whatever. You shouldn't be taught morals, you should feel them.
See, that's my biggest thing that I haven't talked very much about, because I believe what you're saying is completely true. And that morals are a stricture, a constriction that was presented as a necessity because of the destructive nature of human beings to each other. But when we access the temple within ourselves, the divine within us, it arises in us naturally. Because in the Hebrew scriptures, to quote them again, the first thing that happens is that everything is good, and that was good, and this is good, and that's good, and human's good, and the primary origin of our being, mythologically and truthfully, I would say, but not necessarily true, story, but mythologically and primarily, they're essentially and utterly, primarily made of goodness. That's who we really are, at the core of our consciousness.
I think even trying to mark something as good is a fallacy, because good and bad are ideas. It just is.
That's right.
Everything just is. The universe couldn't care less if you go and murder someone. Nope. It's not right or wrong. Only in our idea is it right or wrong. And
because we have something to gain and lose by it.
That's right. But you shouldn't have to be told what's right and wrong. It should be your nature to know. I wouldn't go out and kill anybody. I feel guilty when I run over a hedgehog, really guilty. Because just for me, it's naturally wrong. Not because someone's told me it's right or wrong, because it hurts. Yeah, and it really does. If you I ran over a hedgehog a few years ago, and I still thinking back, I still feel guilty about it, because essentially you're taking away a life, and it hurts. It does, and a lot of people nowadays have lost that empathy. It's the same idea.
I wonder if we, as a species, pardon?
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about. I've been reading this book called Sapiens, Brief History of Humanity. And in it, he talks about the coexistence of sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Florensis, and the interactions between these different subspecies of and the Homo group. And Homo sapiens, what we are, is mostly sapien, but I know I have some Neanderthal DNA because I'm basically European descent. My friends in although I don't actually have any friends who are Maori, I said that, but Maoris may have like Denisovans in them and no Neanderthal, but sapien. So I wonder at what point, or whether it's of an eternal nature, that the heart of love took the lead, because I know that we were the prey for a long time. We were, the lions and tigers and bears were bigger than us. And then we became the big shots with the spears and the bows and the knives and the fire and the social structures. At what point did we begin to develop or find it within ourselves, this temple that lives within us? I mean, it's a kind of an unanswerable question, because there's no history on it. But
I think that from what I understand, the main thing is when we've developed to the extent that our brains now are capable of receiving more of that, what you'd call divine consciousness or divine information. Now that we can receive more of it and translate it in such a way, we're now able to then develop these concepts and such. And it's under hallucinogens,
well
for instance, under hallucinogens and things like that alter the brain. To me, that doesn't mean that consciousness is produced by the brain, which many people will say it is. I think it's more, it opens the brain up to a more receptive state to receive information from these other dimensions or heavens or whatever, as opposed to actually.
I just yesterday saw a study of MRI of, I think it was 71 micrograms of LSD injected into a volunteer which is a very low dose, and then went into the MRI and had a brain scan. And the brain scan, the way that the graphic showed, I'm starting to run out of battery. I'm going to grab my power cord, okay?
No worries.
And, hold on just a second. I have to plug in. I'm going to lose these for a second.
Sure, no problem.
So what I was saying is that they measured they showed a graphic, and the way that the brain normally works. This part of the brain talks to this part of the brain, and there's lines that run through there in the graphic. But in a hallucinogenic state, all of those naturally occurring connections between certain segments of the brain don't exist anymore, and the brain talks to itself in all these crisscrossy ways. It talked about the positive results of those experiences. Positive and lasting results of those experiences are that people are more open to new ideas. They're more able to deal with their post-traumatic stress disorder. They're more able to heal from psychological wounds that research is showing. But it hasn't shown yet what we think is true, because I've taken hallucinogens too when I was younger. And my experience on hallucinogens, mescaline, LSD, and psilocybin, not a lot of times, but enough times, I always had a God experience. Every single time. And the first time I took it, I didn't expect to have a God experience, but that's what happened.
Well, that's what happened, yeah. So it doesn't run off expectations, because if they're all brain produced, you would have thought that your expectations would have a part, so you'd see what you expect to see. But if you're seeing what you're not expecting, then that surely indicates that there's something else going on. I mean, I've never taken hallucinogens or any sort of drugs. I'd be too frightened.
I was in the 1970s. What can I say?
Right. So when the Beatles were around, yeah. But
yeah, exactly. And they were an influence. I mean, that was, they were an influence for sure. Now in New York City, there's major studies, and in Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, I think it is in the United States, there are major studies going on in hallucinogens for treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. What the Army and the Navy and the Air Force are now calling moral injury that results from like PTSD on steroids in war. So there may be medical applications for these tools that we've been given, that we grow, we can find, and help heal people with them that way too.
And a lot of the thing I don't understand is what these things are. I mean, yeah, you can understand why they've been made illegal, because they can cause really bad effects, but they're things that can be found in nature, and generally the ill effects caused by them are by people using them irresponsibly. I've always said if I'm going to ever have an experience with a hallucinogen, I'd want to be in the company of a physician that can measure everything that's going on, and an experienced user that knows exactly what I should be doing. And if I go on a bad trip or whatever, they can get me out of that.
Right.
And
bad trips happen.
Mixing things, that's it. And people are mixing these things, and you think, no wonder. Don't ever. It's like mixing alcohol. Never try to experiment with drugs that you don't understand.
Or even drugs that you do understand that you should never touch, like fentanyl, heroin, Molly, all these other.
Unfortunately, a lot of all that stuff is also very, very much synthetic, isn't it?
It is.
And you don't know what's been added to it. But things like, I suppose, mushrooms and that you can find in the wild, and cannabis, which you can is a plant, obviously. Things.
It's a weed.
It is, yeah, and that's starting to come back into the legal system now, isn't it? But things like that, and dimethyltryptamine, something that's produced theoretically in the human brain itself.
Right.
All these sort of things, when used as they're meant to be used by nature and in a very sensible manner, could be a way of expanding your own consciousness.
I think now that the shackles are off the research, we're going to be able to measure and understand it scientifically, so that the application of it can be a little more controlled, as you were saying, and benefit humanity through its uses for healing. But like you said, a clinical context with an experienced tripper, for lack of any other word. And just to, it's been, I don't know, I was in my 20s, I'm almost 60, turning 60 next month. So
I think hallucinogens should be used as a way of exploring yourself, not as a kind of, as a recreational thing to get you high, because that's that's abusing it, really, for your own benefit. But if you can use it to learn and evolve yourself further, great. I mean, Terence McKenna was a big advocate of it. And he was the one that said, always do it under a physician or something. And yeah, I agree, because you got to if you respect this stuff, it will respect you.
And ultimately, you get to know yourself, but you don't need any sort of chemical inducement to have a divine experience. It's built into the body itself.
That's
it's built into
meditation and prayer.
It is, and it's a longer route. Using those tools takes a long time. It's not. It doesn't take a short amount of time, but it's effective and it works. And it can work in the beginning and give you a little encouragement, and then if you keep your discipline, it opens your inner door.
That's it. And I think if you work for it and learn to produce it naturally yourself, the effects of it will also be a lot longer lasting. And
they're permanent.
They're permanent, exactly. Yeah.
And they don't go. You can meditate for 10 years and then take 10 years off and go back to meditation. You don't start at the beginning. You pick up where you left off.
That's right. Whereas these drugs and everything are a temporary thing. Once the effects have worn off, you're back to square one.
Yep, with some residual effects apparently having to do with psychological. The way you're what am I trying to say? There are residual psychological effects, and some of them might be healing for post-traumatic stress disorder, and some might be a more openness to new ideas. So I've read.
Which is essential to our evolution now.
Oh yeah.
Because as I say, I think we've gone as far as we can physically. We're perfectly suited to our environment. Now it's just a case of a spiritual evolution, I think, to bring us on the next stage of life.
Yeah, except for that we're tinkering in DNA. and genetics and cyborgs and AI and
That's
some
right.
sort of combination of those things.
People wonder why we get cancer a lot more these days, and you think, well, you're adding pesticides to this food, you're genetically modifying these things. What do you expect? Leave it. You know, I mean, the pug. Where did that come from? It's cruel. They can't breathe. They get breathing problems because you've crossbred to make it look cute. Leave nature alone. It's you know, what do you think you can do in 10 years that nature hasn't done in 10 million years? That's the way. Well,
that's exactly where we're at right now. Because you know, now I just read the other day that some kid somewhere in Europe translated a sentence out of the Bible into DNA and then injected himself with it. It's like, say what? You don't even know what you're splicing and dicing. You don't even know what it is.
Yeah. Again, we're back to that oxymoron, aren't we? We're the most intelligent species on the planet, and yet the most stupid.
Yeah, it's like.
I mean, that is stupid, isn't it?
I think so. Very smart too. I mean, is this kid, whoever he was, he's able to do that, right?
Oh yeah, very smart.
But he makes
but
a terrible
what are you doing?
Mistake.
Yeah. You wonder about some people, don't you? Oh well.
Jeepers. Craziness. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, we'll have to have another chat one day because it's really interesting.
Oh, Darren, I had a great time talking to you too. You were very easy to talk with.
Thanks. I usually get that, thank God. That's why I'm trained to be a psychotherapist.
About real things too. See, that's some people are easy to talk to about chit chat.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
But about real things.
I'm no good with small talk.
Me neither.
I'm really awkward, but when we're talking about things that interest me, then I can go on for hours.
Same here. Well, peace to you and to everyone who's there out in viewership land. Yeah.
All 6 of you. Thanks for watching.
All 6. And for viewers, peterpanagore.love.
Yes, that's
peterpanagore.love.
And do you want to quickly just say what that is? Because I think we lost that.
It's sure. It's my website. I have a bunch of videos up there, a bunch of interviews, books. Contact me. I do counseling, spiritual, mystical counseling globally. Clients in Brisbane, Georgetown, Malaysia, and all over the world, and other places too.
Brilliant. So, peterpanagore.love, was it?
Yep. .love.
Perfect.
Man, it was really good to meet you, and funny too. I like funny.
I like funny. It's the only way to be.
Yeah.